sometimes it doesn't work. Okay. All right. So when talking about these handlers, so in general, not just in like, it's not exclusive to React development that like these things trip people up all over, like just in JavaScript in general. So we have an unexpected token on line 1312. We're rendering a render function. Awesome. And probably have one too many curly braces as well. There we go. Okay, so now we can, inside of here, inside of our class that we're extending, we can have a constructor that constructs out our class. And since we're calling, we're extending component, we call super, this.state. And let's call this some list, is just an array. All right, and that is an array of maybe text, and then a Boolean, so clicked false. Okay. So what's going to happen is we're going to render out this list, and as we render it, as we loop over it and render it in our child, we're going to be able to bind some sort of click handler to it, and so we're going to say handle, you know, toggle click. That's a very specific action right there. So it's like we're going to toggle the state. So we're going to expect an object to come in, and then we want that object to say, you know, basically change the list, basically change clicks. So once we'll just console log it for now. Object. So when the object comes in, we want to make sure it's the single object given here, right? So let's make sure that's bound, or we'll do two of them. We'll call this bar and this foo, and they both have a clicked property of false. All right, so that should help us out. Like, I have a feeling maybe part of your project looks like this. I haven't dug into your project yet myself to get to know it more thoroughly. So I'll be doing that later. So first off, we need to pass down to our child component. In fact, we can just, you know, we can just do, say, child component, and that should be right there. Okay, so we can name these imports kind of what we want them from. They don't need to be. It's just going to be defaulting out an object, and it's called hello in that other file, but we can just give it a name right there, child component. Okay, so now we'll just say, you know, click handler gets, don't do that, get this dot handle, I'm just going to copy and paste, handle toggle click, and we need to actually bind that. So this dot handle toggle click equals this dot handle toggle click dot bind this. That's just like a really good way of binding your elements. There's multiple ways you can actually bind your handlers to the constructor function. One way is to, you know, do it in line here, but we'll just leave it like this for now, and just know that that's a very common pattern you'll see in a lot of React applications. So, and the benefit to that is you can open up a component and you can say, oh, app, what am I concerned with about app? Okay, so this is its state right here, and these are the functions that are bound to it that don't come with, you know, these aren't the methods that are on the lifecycle, like part of the React API. These are methods that are bound, that are going to be created by the user, whoever created this component. So if you ever, you know, come into a React component that's already been created, like in a team, you're going to look first at the top of the file and look at all the imports, like see what this component is using. And then you'll look at their constructor and see, you know, what's on state. And then you'll look at, like, right there out of the, you know, right out of the gate, you'll be able to see all the methods, the non-lifecycle methods that are being used by this. Excuse me, I'm just going to let some light in. Okay. Don't want to feel like I'm in a dungeon. All right, so we have this handle toggle click handler, and then we need to pass down our list of elements. So we'll just call it, you know, elements equals, and remember, these can be whatever you want to call them, state.list, but they need to reference things that exist. So this handle toggle click has to exist, and this elements but it's called click handler when we get to child component. And then elements is going to be this dot state dot list. So we just need to make sure that this piece is defined in this component, and this is the variable name, and this is the property name that we're going to be accessing when we get down to child component. So now if I save that, if I go to the hello file, and we're going to say props comes in here, and excuse me, give this place to live, return, and then, yeah, just sort of do a little refactoring here. Oh no, we needed that. Okay, so now we can console.log props, right? Props comes in as a parameter. We pass it those, well, sorry. We need to actually like return something out of this. So, in fact, I could probably do this. Yeah, so let's just return an empty div for now. Okay, and then let me get rid of this and then console log it before the return. So that way, as the component comes and, this function gets called, we're, calling a console log, and then this looks horrible. So let me fix the formatting here. Okay, a little better there. All right, still not very awesome. But yeah, if we look in our console, we should be able to see what's on props. So look, let's clear the console and refresh the page. Ooh, I hope I saved that. Yeah, okay. So here's our elements. So we have our click handler, okay, and it's bound. And you can see that it has, some bound arguments and then some elements, okay? So now for each element, we will go and say, let's just render out the text of each element in an unordered list. And normally, like, yeah, I won't go into that. And we're going to say, props.elements.map, and then each element gets returned as an li. And they should have a key that is set to, element dot, what do we call it, text. And then we should render out the element dot text. And there we go. Okay. So now what needs to happen is, for each of these elements, we need to have our click handler. So when the user comes and clicks on this stuff, we're going to say on click, okay? And we're going to actually give this an anonymous function. And the reason for that is because now we can pass in this body our props dot, what do we call it? Handle click. Gotta look. So we have it right here. It's called click handler. We called it click handler. Are you kidding me? That's so, okay. So yeah, that's what we called it. That's what's bound there. Okay. That's a horrible name for that. But now each time it's clicked, we can simply just pass back up the element itself. So the object that's getting rendered, so this element that comes in, we can pass that element back up. So couple of ways that we can look at this. I saw actually a pretty clever solution on one of your sprints. So I know that there is at least a couple of you guys who were able to get this far, not in the Redux sprint, but in the other sprint, the React 2 sprint, I believe, and we're able to get this to work pretty successfully. So I mean, maybe if there's some light you can shed on this with your peers. But what I would do here is now I would just examine this element. So now as I come and click here, let me clear the console. If I click here, I should see the individual elements, right? Because we're console logging that up in index.js. So handle toggle click gets clicked, an object comes in. So now I can come in and I can say, well, there's a couple of things I can do here. So I can find this text, or like I can search for this element. So basically I can say, yeah, I can find by the element in this array. So I can say list.for each element. So this would have to be defined. So let's make sure we do that. So const list equals this dot state dot list, okay? And then list dot for each, and then for each list item, okay? So now I can do some conditional in here and just say something like if list item dot text, equals our object dot text, then list item, should equal, object. But before that, we want to say, object dot checked equals, object dot checked. So we want to update that object that comes in, and we want to just toggle the state of that. So if we did this instead of looping right there, we could, oh, it's clicked. Thank you. Whoever just said that. Alan, yes, it's not checked, it's clicked. So let's just see what happens. Let's just console log object before, and then let's bring this one up. And after we change the state, so after we change the clicked state from false to true or true to false. So let's save that and let's look and see what happens. Okay, so the first time it came through, so this line, and let's label this so that you can see it more clearly and it doesn't confuse me either. So first time, second time. Okay, so now this would be like how you'd handle this if your state was controlled right here. If this wasn't controlled here, then you would have to pass it up through Redux and handle it there. Okay, so that's kind of what you're going to probably have to do, but this is going to explain what sort of the logic that's going to have to exist going behind this. Because the Redux is going to take this, some action's going to be dispatched on click, and then it's going to, go through the whole Redux process of returning the reducer, and that's going to return the new state back up to the provider. So back up to the store, right? The giant object state. So I want to emphasize that there's a difference between Redux state and there's a difference between the state in this component, but I'm just showing you the logic of this. If you're able to get this handler to work here, then you can pass this up through Redux and get it pretty, it should be pretty trivial to get it to go through that whole Redux process. Okay, so, but here now we need to, okay, so we need to now replace this object on this list. And the simplest way, probably not the simplest, but the most, no, I don't want to say that. The most obvious solution to me would be to loop over the items on list, update the item, and then return it back up to state. So at the end of all this, we're going to say this dot set state, okay? And we're going to say, we're just going to pass it back the list because, that's what it's called, list, and we're passing it list. So this is just shorthand syntax. You don't have to say list equals list. You can use ES6. This object will know that this means this thing. So, all right. So now in here, let's just finish our conditional logic. So, wrap that up and just say console.log found it. Okay, and then I'm going to delete these so that and there's probably a way more eloquent solution to this that it's not coming to me right now. So, okay, so object is not defined. Okay, obj, and this should be triple equals at this point because we're not trying to do any coercion or anything, right? So, okay. So at that point in our iteration, we need to swap out list item for object, right? So then you would just say, I don't know, could you just change the list item dot clicked equals, I don't know. Let's just say in that instance, we're going to do this line up here, essentially. So object.clicked equals, or list item.clicked equals object.clicked, the inverse. Okay. And then return it on state. And now I want to see at the end of it all what our list is. So that one says true now because that's the one we clicked on. So let's see our new state. If I click on bar, so now they should both be true. And then if I click on foo, let me clear this. They should now both be false. So that's actually updating the state right away. Now you're gonna have to just pass that up through Redux and then do this logic in the reducer. So that is definitely, this is a more like involved solution. I guarantee there's more eloquent solution out there. You could do this in a number of different ways. This was just like right off the top of my head what came over this. Okay, so let me see this question here real quick. So why is on-click or similar not an action? Can you describe actions? Okay, so yes, so on-click is an event handler that it exists. So it's an event handler that exists on the DOM. So it's normally all lowercase on-click, and it's normally tied to like buttons and things that are clickable elements like links and stuff like that. So if you had anchor tags that were rendered out some sort of link that pointed somewhere, you put an on-click on those clickable elements. Now JavaScript or the V8 engine or the DOM does that for you under the hood. If you were to just Google on all lowercase on click, that's right there in JavaScript. It has nothing to do with React. Now with React, we use the camel case on click because we're using these as like a synthetic event, so that the virtual DOM that gets rendered with React is bound, it does the binding process, and it goes and it says, this is a handler that's being passed in this way. We need to bind this element to it. But Jason, to answer your question about actions, in Redux, an action is sort of a way to rethink this idea of event handlers. So and every single time that an event handler gets triggered, or like a click handler or a mouse over handler or a mouse leave element handler, or whatever handler, there's hundreds of them that are native to JavaScript. So those are now going to be sort of thought of in this idea of actions to fit this paradigm of Redux. Okay, so an action is what is basically going to be interfacing with the user when it comes to handling some sort of event. Okay, that action gets dispatched out, and now you're out of like the React ecosystem and you're into the Redux ecosystem. Okay, so that action gets dispatched out. It goes to the reducer. The reducer looks at this, and this will answer the types question that may have come from, let's see, where was that? So we had a question in CS1 about types. Did that get to, oh, Sarah, types, the all capital letters ones. What are they? Why are they angry? So they're just so the syntax there for the all caps is basically there to help us distinguish these actions and reducers from being separate. So it's sort of a modeling aspect that's not exclusive to Redux or JavaScript or functional programming in general. That's a lot of when you do a lot of database modeling, you'll see a lot of models like built out in types, like this data type looks like this, and we're going to give it this all caps or camel case, and it's a very just like specific way. It's just part of the Redux ecosystem in that way. So it just helps us like distinguish it out. Plus, when you're using the Redux dev tools, you can easily see what your actions and reducers are. Okay, so once your code or once your handler gets fed through that action, the action goes up to the reducer, you then use your heavy business logic in that reducer to minimize, basically, or to not minimize, but to basically reduce your action into a new state that gets returned to the immutable state object. Because I can't just go to our store and say, you know, this dot store dot state dot data dot whatever manipulate, because the store is an immutable object that simply, you know, gets returned out of a reducer. So the reducer does the mutation and gives it back to the store, and when the store updates, you have all of those updates that come through that life cycle. So actions, you know, are bound to click handlers or on event handlers of some sort. They get fed up to the reducers do all the logic, and then the reducers return out that new state tree, and then voila, it feeds it all the way through that ecosystem. And once you connect using the connect function, once you connect your state with the map dispatch to state, or map dispatch to props, or map state to props function, sorry, there's other functions in that are involved in Redux there. So once you do that, it's, you know, that's where you sort of define, okay, when you click this thing, the state that's going to come in, you know, it's going to be handled through this, and then you call it with those. So it looks something like this at the end of your file. When you say like, it's going to break everything, but it's going to say like, you know, const map or match props to state, and that is in and of itself a function that just simply, you know, all we're doing here is, you know, going to be returning, you know, whatever. So we have our state in here, and then we just, you know, you do your, you know, you do your like your modeling logic here. Like, how can I better explain that? So you basically say, you know, this is kind of how we want our, you know, state to be coming in as now props. So now we can say, you know, this dot props inside of here, if this was bound to Redux. And that's where you would come on this line and say, instead of, you know, export default app, you'd say export default, and then you use your connect map props to state, and then you call it, you instantiate it with this you know, you invoke it right here with your, you know, whatever your element is called, which is, in this case, our component is app, so it would be app like this. So that probably just like added a whole bunch of confusion, but hopefully it clarified at least a little bit. So, all right, we are to the end of this little Q&A, but let me see this real quick. What is Node referring to in add to do.js? It appears to refer to child component needed. My assumption is that yes, it's just a variable. So if I'm wrong on that, hopefully somebody can correct me on that. And then, yeah, so seeing the JSX is HTML. So there was this thing called like XML or XHTML for a long time, and everyone hated it. It was pretty popular earlier on in like larger scale application development, and JSX sort of brought that back. It's like we're bringing sexy back, but in XHTML or whatever they call that stuff. But yeah, just think of JSX as like a way to return DOM elements in JavaScript. So it's really just, it gives you the power in JavaScript to handle, you know, or in React to handle your application logic state, your UI and your styles right there in the same component. All right, guys. I would hope, so handle toggle click, is that a special method? No, that's just a method that we made. We just made it ourselves. It's special in the fact that we made it. The special methods, I would say the more special methods are the lifecycle hooks. So, all right. Okay, if you guys have any questions, yeah, just keep plugging away at this. You guys are free to go for the evening, and we'll see you bright and early tomorrow, or late if you're along or something on the East Coast.
Ryan.
Yes.
Hey, I talked to you about that square theory, and